Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful building. I have had the pleasure of being here a couple of times, but it certainly makes a change from County Hall. So good of you all to make the effort. So today we have apologies from Eamon Keogh from Southampton, from Joy Dennis from West Sussex, and Ellie Burrows from Network Rail. We are expecting Lulu and her officer from Hampshire. They may turn up. So on the back of that, just to remind you that actually today will be streamed live to TFSC and YouTube channel and available to watch following today's meeting on the website. So if when you're speaking you could introduce yourself and say your names, that would be really helpful. I think we all know each other enough to, hi Lou, not go around the table, do we? But if we all introduce ourselves as we speak, that would be great. So we have the draft minutes from previous meetings being circulated, and thank you for those that turned up at the LGA for our last meeting. Is it your wish that I sign these as a true record, those who were there? Okay, thank you. The draft business plan, as you know, has been prepared for today's meeting, and we will be seeking approval ahead of submission to DfT. And also the Transport Strategy Refresh was officially launched and it's currently out for consultation following the approval of the board at the last meeting. Declarations of interest, are there any that don't appear in the record? None? Thank you. I understand we don't have any public statements from the public. Thank you. So we will move on to agenda item 5, which is next steps for TFSC, and I'll invite Rupert to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So as members will be aware, we issued a consultation on next steps for Transport for the South East, and that was predominantly at a time when we were considering what powers might be helpful in order to take Transport for the South East forward. Partly in the context of the Cities and Local Devolution Act, which sets out the remit of FTBs and the powers that they can potentially draw down from government, or indeed whether to continue as the partnership that we have. We've had a number of responses from constituent authorities and external partners, but in some respects the sort of wind has shifted a bit in that the devolution white paper was published on the 16th of December. We knew it was coming, we weren't quite certain when, and nor were we clear on what the overall content would be. That is now apparent, and I'm aware that a number of authorities around this table have put themselves on the priority programme for devolution with government, and I know that many of you are hoping for a response later this week. The devolution white paper sets out a number of powers which future combined authorities can draw upon. That includes transport powers, some public health powers, economic regeneration, skills, and some more between. As a result of the devolution white paper and the pace at which government is seeking to proceed, and those authorities will know whether they're on that programme this week, what is clear is the direction of travel from this government is devolution and local government reorganisation. My view at this stage is, notwithstanding the responses to the consultation, which I have to say are broadly positive of the work that Transport for the South East have done to date, but recognises the world in which we find ourselves in, and that now is not the time, rightly, to seek any formal powers, given the authorities around the table are considering how to brigade themselves and their own futures. So I'm extremely grateful for colleagues who have responded to the consultation. It's been really helpful for us. but if sort of events have overtaken us, and as a result of that, it makes sense to work with you as you develop your approaches to devolution, rather than seek anything more specific for Transport for the South East at the current time. That point might come, but at the moment I think it is worth us just taking stock and allowing the region around us to grow in the shape that they've expressed their wish to government. Chairman, it might well be worth, at this moment, we know we have Dan Taylor here from the DFT. Dan may wish to put the department's perspective on devolution, but
Thank you.
not wishing to put you on the spot. But our position is we're not going to do anything at the moment. Let's see how the world evolves around us.
Just before I come to you, Dan, if I can just also add that not directly connected to this, but I did go up to Leeds to the launch of the transport strategy with Louise Haigh, and sadly she'd gone by the time I got home. But I've also managed to get a recent meeting in with Heidi Alexander, who's the new Transport Secretary, and Danny Williamson, who was leading, I don't know if he still is leading on the strategy, is known to me. But anyway, I'm saying to him about the role of subnational transport boards, not specifically TFSE. He gets that. As does Heidi Alexander, and we worked with Heidi when we were starting out as Transport for the South East, when she was working in the Mayor's office. So both of those, I think, were helpful meetings. And just last week, I caught up with Steve Norris, who you know chairs Transport for the North. He came down to the LGA Council Forum last week and gave his take on devolution and the role of transport within devolution, because of course you know he'd done a lot of work for John Major after the demise of the GLC, and he was saying how bringing people together actually is an advantage and such a benefit for transport. And I'll finish by saying it's not often you'll hear me saying much about Andy Burnham, but it's on record that Andy Burnham said, sent his praises about Transport for the North, saying that if it didn't exist, he would have had to have developed it. So I think there is a big role for subnational transport bodies. We just need to keep our eye on how it fits in the South East and how we can best use the expertise that currently exists, but more importantly, the advantage of having a change of constituent partners. So if we keep that on. Thanks. Sorry, I went on a bit.
That's all right, not at all. Perhaps just to pick up that thread of the Secretary of State meeting. So, as Keith mentioned, they had the introductory meeting with the Secretary of State, and the feedback we had from that, as Peter Duggan, who many of you know was present at the meeting, was very positive. I think the Secretary of State was interested in hearing about what TFSE does and what you offer. We've since followed up by sending her some more information she asked for about the Centre of Excellence and your priorities and so on as an organisation. So I think that went very well, as Keith mentioned. So I think that was a good thing. A few other points, perhaps just to update on, if you like, before I just come back to Rupert's question on devolution. Keith, you mentioned the Danny Williams and the Integrated National Transport Strategy, so that strategy continues. So as you'll remember, this was something that was launched under Louise Haigh as Secretary of State. Our new Secretary of State has come in and has sort of maintained the desire to run an integrated national transport strategy, so that sort of still holds. There's been a bit of a pause while they just make sure she sort of gets an opportunity to put her sort of slant on things, but in terms of the kind of key proposal, that's still there, that's still going ahead, and the regional roadshows that TFSE amongst the other STBs are involved in helping to organise are sort of going in the diary now. So I'm expecting those to happen over the next sort of month or so. So that's all continuing. Just in terms of other things within the sort of departmental business, as you'll all be aware, I'm sure, we're all working towards the spending review. So this is what will set budgets from 26-27 onwards for the next 3 years. That's a process that will run from now up until sometime in the spring. We don't exactly know when it's going to be announced, but there's, as you can imagine, a whole sort of process between departments and Treasury between now and then to work that through, which will go through many iterations and many steps, as I'm sure you're aware. And not directly as part of that process, but separate to that, because it relates to 25-26. So we're working through our internal business planning at the moment to be able to confirm budgets for STBs for 25-26 financial year, and that will hopefully be coming pretty soon. So we know you're always keen to get that as soon as possible. So we're working through that process for our own internal business planning for that period. Quite a bit of legislation, just again, many of you will be aware of. Buses Bill was sort of late December. The sort of first round of the rail legislation that will move towards the public ownership side of things, the Public Ownership Act to allow franchises to move into public ownership was laid in December. The next round of legislation, which is the Railways Bill, which will allow the creation of Great British Railways as a legal entity, the consultation is due out sort of imminently, I'm told, and I don't think it's quite out yet, but pretty soon. We have a shadow Great British Railways at the moment, as you may be aware, which was the desire to at least set something up to get momentum and get the organisations working together before the legislation comes in. So that's now in place, but the consultation for the Railways Bill is due shortly. So that's the sort of next piece of the legislative package. And then last thing, just picking back up on what you said about devolution. I mean, in general terms, this is more MHLG's sort of lead than ours. I think the transport things in the devolution white paper were more or less what we were expecting. I hesitate to say technical, but they were probably more around the detail of what the various levels of devolution give, and they were more what we're expecting. The local government reform was more sort of MHLG's lead, so we were sort of less cited on, I think, perhaps quite how progressive that will be in terms of pushing that forward. And I think, as you've suggested, Rupert, I appreciate that will take quite a lot of local authorities' time when you've got both those things happening at the moment, local government reform and those that are looking towards devolution. I mean, I think as Rupert set out, I think it makes sense that authorities will want to understand their sort of position before thinking about where you want STBs, but Transport for the South East in particular to focus. But just coming on the final point, I mean, I think there's nothing in the speaking from a sort of DfT official's point of view, there's nothing in the devolution bill or sort of intentions that to me undermines at all the role for STBs. I mean, in fact, I think in a changing environment where you've got sort of new groups forming of different sort of shapes and sizes and trying to sort of work things out, a kind of point of consistency throughout that process, and a place where transport, because transport will still need to come together, and we will still want transport to be looked at more broadly than just at a regional or even city region level. The role for STBs and for TFSE as working as a devolution partner is sort of, I would say, enhanced by that. So remains really important. It was a small mention, but it was a mention nonetheless in the devolution white paper that STBs were part of that regional piece that we thought it was important that was there. So yeah, we see sort of, I suppose, STBs very much as part of the devolution discussion going forwards, and it sounds sensible we put your proposal for sort of reviewing the role TFC plays in that and how that relates to the sort of constituent partners as you get a sense of how that's all going to work through.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on parking? Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Councillor Trevor Mewton, Brighton Hove City Council. Thank you for those updates, and I do appreciate that we're at there'll be announcements later this week in relation to devolution, so I don't want to open up that debate particularly, but a focus, as Rupert kindly has set out, is about this future of the STBs and particularly in Transport the South East. Now, the different authorities represented here, a number of which put applications in, probably a large number of which put applications in for devolved mayoral strategic authorities. And the role of Transport South East, I do see it's quite important, it's very critical, in fact, in this context. You mentioned Andy Burnham, where you have in the north groupings of mayoral devolved authorities. So it'd be interesting to see how that works in terms of the interactions between devolved authorities, and perhaps that's a model that we need to understand. And you made reference to the budget settlements for 25-26, and it will be a 3-year settlement, if that's the inference of that, and how that might fit over the timeline for devolved, particularly those who put applications in for the fast-track devolution option, because it'd be interesting to see how those marry or meet together, or perhaps need to be rejigged as appropriate. So I do appreciate you don't want to open up that whole discussion of devolution and also context of the announcements made later today, but I do think it's just checking in on the TFSE role. Is it essentially business as usual until the change happens, and then how does it form in relation to maybe a grouping of devolved authorities? Thank you.
I mean, from my perspective, we've just put a business plan forward that sets out what 25-26 is going to deliver for DFT. If that's accepted, then we are on that stretch. And as I say, even if the mayors are elected in May 26, they're not going to walk in and be able to run. They're going to need... But and again, I'm going off a slight tangent, but our constitution allows mayors to have a seat at this table without changing the constitution. So I think we have sort of done a bit of forward thinking, but it's a matter of adopting and adapting as we go through the year. I think. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, if I may. Thank you. I suppose at this time of change, Transport for the South East is a constant in relation to strategic transport. It is there whilst the new footprints establish themselves. There's still a job of work to do in the South East. We don't want to get left behind. And the Centre of Excellence work is quite crucial in that, and supporting you as local transport authorities in building your business cases and bringing schemes forward. You know, that still is something that needs to happen, despite the changes that might be afoot. And even if you looked across what a potential new geography might look like, where you end up with 4, maybe 5 strategic authorities, we have corridors that cut across those authorities. And so the importance of that strategic oversight along both road and rail corridors, I think, remains crucial. And my key aim is to make sure that you feel supported during this process. You're getting what you need out of the, from the Centre of Excellence work, that we're still bringing things forward. We've still got some real challenges in the South East. We're still the net contributor to the Exchequer. We've still got pockets of transport-related social exclusion that all need addressing. And we can help make those points for you as you develop and put in place your new structures.
And perhaps if I just add, I mean, with work that I do with a number of other STBs across the country, so there are several STBs, perhaps take Midlands Connect as an example, where they currently have that sort of mixed economy of mayors and non-mayoral areas, and that works very well. It's a slightly different dynamic, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's radically different. It's you have local representatives, and sometimes it's mayors, and sometimes it's council leaders, or whatever it might be. But that mixed economy works, and and again, that's a big region that has the West Midlands has certain priorities, and East Midlands has certain priorities, but there are certain things that cut across all of them. So the existence of mayors doesn't, I think, necessarily change fundamentally the way an organisation like this works. Of course, you'll need to, as all STBs would, take account of the views of the representatives if those change. And coming back to, I know I've said this before at meetings like this, but what's really important is that as members, you work sort of frankly and honestly with TFSE and to make sure that they're delivering on the things that you think are important. And so that's the STB is most powerful when it speaks for its members, and that's what we want the STB to do. So be sort of and that's how you make sure it does its job to the best of its ability.
We are recommended to note the response that we've received and again note the current holding position that we take. Is that agreed? Thank you. So on to agenda item 6, which is business planning for 2025-26. And Keir, I think you're going to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So board members will remember a bit of the background here. Last summer we had a workshop on what should be in the business plan for the upcoming year. We built on that. The department asked us to prepare funding scenarios of how we divvy up our work and our business plan in different scenarios. That was signed off by the board back in October. Following that, the department said we have the option of submitting a business plan to them if we'd like to, and board members decided to take that up. So attached in the papers is the business plan that we've drafted. As board members will be able to see, we first focused on TFSC's track record of delivery, so set out all the work we've achieved with DFT and local authorities' contributions in the preceding year. Then the big focus is actually on TFSC's role and how we help make sure delivery happens. And that was the feedback from board members at that workshop back last summer, that everything we should do should be about enabling delivery. So there's a big section on how we enable the delivery of government's missions, particularly making the case for big infrastructure investment to happen in our region. And then there's a lot about how we support local authority delivery, which Rupert touched on earlier, through the analytical framework, Centre of Excellence, and the thematic work. So hopefully board members agree that that makes a strong case for TFSC, as ultimately this document will go to the Secretary of State to ask for funding for the upcoming year. So we'd need board members to sign off that document. The other thing to note is we're also forecasting an underspend of funding in this financial year. So this business plan sets out how we'd intend to allocate that to do more thematic work basically on behalf of the board in the upcoming year. So there's £317,435 that we forecast at this moment. And we're recommending that £45,000 go to electric vehicle charging, so building the second version of that tool, which basically gives local authorities a lot more in their toolkit that they can do using that. We're also recommending £120,000 to go to the Centre of Excellence. So in the core business plan, we've allocated £50,000 to the Centre of Excellence. That basically keeps the lights on, it keeps the website running, keeps the platform running. This £120,000 enables us to give extra support to local authority officers. And we know that's probably quite important at this time because the government's going to ask local authorities to do a lot more, especially on things like bus franchising. So this support will go directly to helping local authorities through that. There's an extra £48,000 for the strategic investment plan refresh, which basically lets us do a much more intensive version of that and set out the top schemes that we think the government should invest in our region. And then there's the remaining £104,435 goes to scheme development. So we're specifically looking with that, developing a funding and finance model for the A27, M27 to help demonstrate to government how we can make that go ahead in this time of restrained government finances. So Chair, we're asking for the board's comments and approval for the business plan and for the allocation of the expected underspend.
Thank you. Any comments or questions that anyone, please?
Thank you. Councillor Sophie Cox, I'm the leader at Worthing Borough Council. I just wondered about the A27 one that was on there, and do you have any timescales on that? Because the A27 is a big route that goes through Worthing, and it's been a considerable issue for residents, as I'm sure many around the table will know. Is there any idea of timescales on when that funding model will be written up, and also whether districts and boroughs will get to input into that as well?
Please.
Yeah, so essentially if the board agree, we can look at allocating that funding and starting the work immediately. And yeah, through the Chief Officer Rupert, we'd engage with all the local authorities and boroughs on that corridor to make sure the work, kind of like you said, works for you and is actually helping to drive that forward.
Chairman, if I may.
Please.
So this is about really understanding what has to be true in order to get private sector investment into public infrastructure. That is the $64,000 question. It's not about whether it should be a particular engineering solution at a particular location. It's the principle, given, as you rightly say, M27 Junction 8, Arundel, Worthington Lancing all got scrapped. So we know it's a problematic corridor. We also know that Labour government's manifesto talks about how you bring in private infrastructure investment, private investment into public infrastructure. We have been doing some work with a number of investors to ask that what has to be true question. It's not easy because it's all about the rate of return that an investor will get and their willingness to put in against a whole series of risks, in revenue risks that they face. So we have had some very we've had some conversations with the DFT and about how we take that forward. It's something that, to my mind, has to come forward with the department in partnership. I think if Transport for the South East would come forward with a model, it doesn't really work unless you've got some sort of government support behind it. So that's the sort of context rather than engineering solutions. I think that comes later. And some of the engineering solutions will have a bearing on the risk that investors would be willing to take. So that's where we are. We think actually now's the opportunity to start really exploring this and take forward more detailed conversations with those investors we've already had discussions with.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Simon Curry from Medway Council. Within the work streams in the business plan, you've got freight down as one of the key things, and that's something I'd be interested to hear a bit more background on that point, particularly if you've got anything to add at the moment. You talk about the modal shift to waterborne freight and stuff like that, but also terminals where you can have rail and road interchange and stuff, and ideal locations for those. It's a bit of a challenge in North Kent for us. Thank you.
Mark, will you pick that up later in your... Can we pick it up there? Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So now we are asked to review the business plan and agree to submitting the draft business plan for 25-26 to the department and agree to spend the forecast uncommitted spend of 317,435 on delivering additional technical work. Are we happy to agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 7, which is a technical call-off contract, third-year extension. And Sarah, I think you're going to introduce, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So this paper is regarding the technical call-off contract that Transport for the South East has. Members will, I'm sure, remember that in March 23, you agreed the need for the technical call-off contract, predominantly because the amount of technical work undertaken by the team had increased and an inordinate amount of time was spent procuring each piece individually, and it would be more efficient to have one contract that covered all of it to get those efficiencies. In July 2023, you agreed to award a contract to Steer, and a consortium of other consultants within their supply chain. That contract was for 2 years initial term with a 1-year extension allowed for within the contract for a cost of the initial term up to £4 million and then a potential additional £2 million worth of work in that third year if the extension was enacted. Within TFOC's constitution, that's not something, because of the value of the work, that can be delegated to the lead officer, and so that's why the board took the decision to award the contract and why the board is being invited today to consider the recommendations to extend. So the contract has been running now since July 2023. In that time, 36 separate pieces of technical work have been procured, with a value of just over £2 million between them. And I think it's safe to say that I don't think that would have been able to be possible had we not had that call-off contract in place to actually get that volume of work out the door. The contract allows us to have a very collaborative process, bringing in the supply chain much earlier on, benefiting from their knowledge as we're scoping the work as well as we are doing it, which has had big benefits in terms of how we operate. Obviously, there is also the benefit of not having to procure each piece of work individually. That brings savings not just to the Transport for the South East team, but also to our host authority team, who we don't need as much procurement and legal support from as well. Having that volume of work that's been completed has allowed us to reduce our underspend on our budget, which again is something that we had been asked to do by DFT, and that has reduced significantly in the last year, as you'll have seen from the business planning process. The contract does have robust processes within it to manage the contract, and I think it's acknowledged that the quality of the outputs we're getting are very, very good, along with the ability to really sort of get that wider knowledge sharing and experience passing on between the consultancy team and the TFSE team itself. Within the business plan, you'll see, you know that we do continue to have an ambitious and varied technical programme, and that is going to continue to require technical specialist support from the supply chain in order for us to deliver it. Having a new contract or to go back to individually procuring each separate piece of work has not been considered cost or revenue efficient. Having carried out the review of the contract, the current contract is performing well. To extend it is considered the most efficient process, also maximising the knowledge and experience that has already been gained through the initial term of that contract. Therefore, then, the board are recommended to consider the outcome of the contract review and to enact the allowed for extension within the contract, which will take the contract up to July 2026.
Thank you. Comments, questions? No? Everybody think it makes sense? Trevor?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that summary and presentation. I realise I'm not an expert on procurement, so if I say the wrong thing here, I do apologise, but if I understand it correctly, there's some new changes to procurement rules, particularly in relation to contracts over £1 million. Is this in any way affected by that?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. It's an existing contract that had an extension allowed for within it, and so therefore this is just to enact that extension rather than to procure something separately. So the advice from East Sussex as our host authority has not suggested. I'm quite happy that I will go and check before we do enact anything, but nothing's been suggested to us at this stage that it does.
Okay. Right. Well, if that's the case, we will check. Better to be safe. Sorry. Thanks for that. So we are asked to note the performance of the technical call-off contract with Steer Consortium and the ongoing need to support to deliver the technical programme, and agree the allowed for extension of the current technical call-off contract for a third year until July 2026. All happy to agree that? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Agenda item 8 is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and Mark, I think you're going to deal with that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. The purpose of this report is just to bring to the board's attention the work that we've been undertaking as part of our electric vehicle charging infrastructure work stream, specifically looking at the impact of the electrification of commercial fleet vehicles on charge point demand. Obviously quite a lot of work has been undertaken looking at sort of the particularly the car fleet, but we need to clearly think about this other issue that's out there looming, which is potentially going to have an impact on the demand, particularly for public charge points across the southeast. So in terms of some background, this is a piece of work that we were actually asked to do through the National Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Strategy, where there was a call on STBs to particularly take up this issue of the impact of commercial vehicle fleets. So that, in essence, that's what we've done. Just in terms of, as the paper sets out, some of the context, that the significance of this issue is quite stark in that although commercial vehicles only comprise about 15% of the number of vehicles out on the road, they make up 26% of the miles driven and 42% of the greenhouse gas emissions that currently come from that sector. So even though they're a smaller proportion, they have a bigger impact, hence the need to think about this sector. But one of the challenges that's kind of emerging is that in terms of provision of public charging points, we might say, oh, well, all of these vehicles are all commercial vehicles, surely they're all going to be recharged within depots. But actually, when you start to unpick the issue, as we know already, lots of commercial vehicle fleets operate from people's private home addresses. Some of the big fleets, some of the gas companies run, the drivers take the vehicles home at night. And also delivery vehicles, when they're going about their business, are likely to have, if they're converted to electric, they're likely to have a requirement to charge during the day as they go about their business. So thinking about that puts us in the territory of needing to think about what we need to provide on street for these commercial vehicles to encourage the uptake of commercial vehicles, electric vehicles amongst these fleet operators. So that's what we sought to do, was to identify a methodology that would enable us to sort of forecast how this situation is likely to evolve and what that might mean for charge point provision across the southeast, particularly as we think about that these vehicles are going to need bigger bays in which to charge, and also they're likely to require sort of the ability to sort of take higher levels of charge in a shorter time. So these are going to be the rapid charges that we need. And obviously so much of what's being provided out on street at the moment and out in the public domain is aimed at sort of the car fleet. So as the paper sets out, and the appendix to the paper contains the methodology that we've produced, that sort of produced some forecasts of what demand is likely to look like in the future. We've also worked to make sure that will be available through the existing tool that we've already provided that contains forecasts of how the car fleet is going to electrify in the future. So we've sort of added this piece of work into that. There was good stakeholder engagement through the development of this work. We had a specific stakeholder group to oversee its development, and good representation from some of the industry bodies, the BVLRA and the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, and also obviously our constituent local authorities, the network operators from the electricity sector, and the charge point operators. So good buy-in to what we've done. So as I said, Appendix 1 sets out the sort of the technical detail. We've also started some further work looking at what the opportunity there is to commercialise some of this activity in terms of what opportunities are there out there to provide these charging points that we obviously now need on a commercial basis, and some pilot work has started with Slough and Brighton and Hove on that. So in terms of the sort of the recommendation, obviously the content of the technical detail is there to note, but the next stage that we wanted to do is just to work through our DFT contacts to just get to have a conversation with OZEV about the work that we've undertaken, given that this was a homework project that they set us, and particularly to make the case that, as we're the only STB that's taken this forward, of the need for the resources to be made available such that this work could be replicated across the rest of the STB community, so everyone has the benefit of it in terms of giving this information to their constituent authorities who are better better able to plan for the provision that's needed for the electrification of the commercial fleet.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Just a question from me. Mapping and doing all this work is essential next step. Is it connected in any way with actually what electricity is available? Because we know that the grid is the biggest thing holding back a lot of these, especially the commercial ones. I don't know whether Southampton has been fixed yet, but understood they couldn't get enough electricity to power the buses. So I just wondered if there's any connection across.
Yes, we do have a connection across. As I said, in the steering group for this work, we had the DNO, the network operator from the electricity sort of supply side thing, to hear and understand what the forecasts are. Because as you say, they need to take account of those in planning for the future provision of the supply to these things, which is clearly a constraint on the rollout. So we've had them very much in the room when we've been doing this work.
Brilliant, thank you. Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the report. I really find this encouraging, and you referenced Brighton and Hove. We're passionate about public EV charging in our city. We've got 480 at the moment. We've got some fast and rapid charging points as well. And even just, I think last week I was over at Shoreham Port, where they brought over a Mercedes fully electric truck, and had the privilege of being in the cabin when we picked up 40 tonnes of timber and drove around the port, fully electric. So it's very exciting. The technology is there, but we do need the infrastructure. And we know, particularly in relation to HGVs, this could be a game changer in terms of air quality, particularly in more urban areas. So it's generally exciting, and the stats you gave in terms of the impacts, percentage of miles driven by larger vehicles, trade vehicles, etc., is really important as well. I hear that point that Keith has rightly raised about the infrastructure of the the capacity of the grid, and that question's been answered. But in terms of incentivising, one of the challenges I think we've got, we'd love to think about the uptake of EV taxis, for instance. But we don't, unlike London, we don't have a scrappage scheme. We don't have those incentives in the same way. And I think we're looking at how to lift some of those barriers to enable that. One way to look at perhaps where some of the commercial vehicles are parked, maybe where the drivers live or close to their residence, to make sure we've got EV infrastructure there to enable them to do their work and park up overnight and have a full charge for the morning. And that's quite an important aspect. So I know that's been part of our next funding round for our EV offer. But yeah, just want to really emphasise this is such an important thing. The other point is, and it was a conversation I had with a truck driver who asked me in Shoreham-Port, how would I, where's the next best place to charge? And I'm not an expert on this, but I knew that Pease Pottage have invested a very good EV charging network, I think with Tesla involved, and that's very, very positive. But I personally have gone to Clackett Lanes in the past and been very discouraged by what's available on some of the motorway service stations. So I do think, and I'm not a commercial driver, but I'm just saying we do need to up our game in relation to charging infrastructure at key intersections to make sure that these vehicles, as they start picking up, can get those rapid charges when they need them.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jan. Thanks for the report. Really good, and the appendix is brilliant. I love it. It's my kind of data-based report, so I really enjoy those. A couple of issues, really, from my perspective. One of them, I mean, we've got a couple of SME firms in our area, in Medway, who are now fully electric with their vehicles, but have had to install all their own infrastructure to go that way. It's something that they believe in. So how we support SMEs at that level, and particularly in relation to development sites where all the workers are coming on and off every day, either in vans or in buses supplied by the companies who are developing the sites, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of issues around how we support SMEs in this in particular. Another issue which is really kind of high priority is the role of buses. I love that stat on the 15, which was just referred to, the 15% and 42% stat at the start of the report, and I think in that respect that if the other 85% of vehicles on the road, most of them are very low kilometre generated by residents in their own cars and stuff like that, and how we can build the bus fleets up to take a lot of those vehicles off the road as well and decongest, particularly in town centres. But the buses are struggling with their supply of electricity as well. So if we're thinking about how we deal with the infrastructure supply for vans, we need to be thinking in parallel with buses, and I'm sure you are, but it's just a point worth emphasising. I met with Arriva, who's our biggest company, just in the last couple of weeks, and they would love to start introducing EV buses in North Kent, but they don't have the infrastructure at the moment, and they'd be looking to see how they could do that. So it's certainly something that needs to be in our thinking. Thanks, Chair.
Rather different sort of point, that I found the paper impressive, and indeed some work of this kind is clearly very necessary in order to optimise the distribution of charging infrastructure. And I get that, even though I'm the representative for Protected Landscapes. However, the point I just wanted to make is that these charging places can, particularly if they're supporting commercial vehicle fleets and heavy goods vehicles and that kind of thing, can be quite intrusive. Landscape sense, large areas of parking are unnecessary, and will tend also to be linked to other infrastructure. The work of the Freight Forum has shown that that too needs strengthening to support the drivers of heavy goods vehicles and the like as they go about their work. Anyway, the point I simply wanted to make was that they are therefore fairly significant landscape features. They're not designed as landscape features, but they inevitably do create an impact. And speaking for the protected landscapes as a whole, I think that besides alongside the kind of mathematical exactness of, what the optimum positions for these facilities are, it will be necessary to factor in the landscape impact which they may have, particularly on the protected landscapes. Now, I'm going to admit that when we, as a planning authority, turned down a big recharging project at Burriton, we were overruled on appeal, and so it's gone ahead. But it is also true that the duty on public authorities to have regards to the objectives of the protected landscapes has been strengthened to seek to further. So we would, of course, want to see that taken into account. Having said all of that, we absolutely get the need for decarbonisation, and we're in favour of it too. But it's about optimising the interaction between the landscapes that we have to care about. Thank you.
Very much a balance. You can't have one overriding the other. Daniel.
Thank you. Daniel Ruiz,
Yes.
member of the Business Advisory Group. Could you expand a bit on how you see this piece of work being taken forwards? Because you mentioned the word optimisation. There are inevitably a number of things that decisions need to be made in parallel, because there are a lot of interdependent activities. If you're going to get investment, you're going to get adoption and so on. What part are we going to be able to play in making sure that the uptake is optimal and the provision of infrastructure is optimal?
If in paragraph 5, I sort of set out and just described the further work that we're now currently undertaking, which is picking up on a point that Rupert made earlier on about commercialisation. Very much the introduction of public charging infrastructure there's been a lot of pump priming, shall we say, through the Levi funding that people will have heard about. What we're anxious to see is what commercial opportunities are there to lever in more private sector investment into provision of some of this infrastructure, particularly in urban areas where the demand might be highest, as a mechanism for trying to encourage, trying to break this circle of the fleet not wanting to electrify because there isn't the provision, and the private sector not willing to invest because they can't see the demand coming on stream. I think very much what this work sort of starts is to unlock that, shall we say, and working on these 2 case studies that I talked about with Slough and Brighton and Hove to actually look at what that actually might mean out on the ground. So that's how we intend to take, or are taking, this work further forward, and there'll be a further report back on that specific work at the next partnership board meeting.
Can I just add to that, please? In that case, that sounds good, and I want to also say that the report was really laden with information and insight, so thank you for that. But please make sure that we're keeping at the forefront of our minds the outcome, which is uptake, adoption and investment. Thank you.
Noted. Okay.
I was just going to ask, have we seen a successful conversion rate from onto electric for vans? I'm just thinking National Highways did a programme on the A3 which had a really poor conversion rate. It's exactly the people you're talking about. Take the vehicles home, single businesses. There was not that transfer rate, even with generous grants of £5,000 to £15,000. They could not get the interest from companies. So is there examples where it has worked?
I'm not.
The forecast.
Yes.
Very good, as you can imagine.
The
reality is quite different.
I think I think it's about, obviously our role setting out those forecasts to encourage the uptake. But yes, I mean there is emerging evidence coming forward as some of these things go in about the potential positive impacts. But the uptake at the moment is not following the trajectory of cars, and clearly more needs to be done, and we do need to find, as you're saying, some success stories that enable to encourage others to sort of adopt that behaviour. But hence why we were asked, I think, by the DFT to do this work, and why we're keen to go to report back to OSIF to tell them about what we're doing and make sure that others benefit from it as far as possible.
and I didn't put my speaker on, so apologies for anybody who missed that. It's Councillor Roby in place of Councillor Dennis is not.
No, thank you, Chairman. David Roby, KCC. Councillor Dennis, unable to attend the meeting, has asked for me to deputise. It's quite a short report, and I'm not going to go through it all. But the committee reviewed the draft business plan for 25-26, noting the work that had gone into it. The uncommitted underspend was reviewed, and the committee agreed with the recommended allocation of funding to the additional technical work outlined. The committee reviewed the financial position spend to December 24 and requested for the 25-26 financial reporting to have a confidence rating included for the end of year forecasts. We went through the strategic risk register, and we noted quite a few risks, perhaps it's not quite the right word, connected with devolution, which we talked about comprehensively at the start of this meeting, so I'm not going to go through them. It's just a matter of keeping an eye on how the situation develops, which I think is what we'll do. And to that end, we've asked for devolution to be a standing item on the agenda. And we agreed the forward work programme for the committee for 25-26. So the members of the Partnership Board are asked to note the discussions and actions arising at the meeting of the Audit and Government Committee and to agree the strategic risk register.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments on the meeting report? All happy to note and agree?
Agree.
Thank you very much. We come to agenda item 10, which is the financial update. And I think we're going to take this.
Yes, so we'll be very brief with this. So in terms of the financial update, we work closely with the Audit and Governance Committee, Councillor Roby and Councillor Dennis, the Chair, just to try and drive down spend and seek cost efficiencies wherever possible, to reallocate that to doing more technical work. As it's the end of quarter 3, we now are able to accurately forecast the end of the financial year, and this financial underspend this finance paper just sets out where the £317,000 of underspend that we talked about earlier comes from. So £54,000 is from savings on the technical programme. There's about £180,000 of savings from salaries and training as we've held vacancies. We've underspent £40,000 or so on communications and engagement, particularly because we cancelled our planned Connecting the South East event last year. And we've also underspent by £42,610 on governance and operational expenses. And that's just by foregoing officer attendance at events and delaying planned work to review TFC's governance structures. And that's just to update the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the financial update?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Partly because I joined the board just last year. Regarding the vacancies, and we have held vacancies in the team, was that a deliberate decision to do that, and why was the case? Thank you.
We're frankly acutely aware that a number of authorities were facing some quite challenging financial circumstances. My view, and I have the sort of benefit of a foot in both camps, if you like, you just recognise that you've got to ask yourself the question, can we do the level of work without that resource at this time? If the answer in the short term is yes, then don't recruit. Also mindful that a number of organisations will have their own policies around redundancies and redeployment, given set budget setting times, that if we were going to recruit, then the first port of call would be through those redeployment lists. So it's really about just making sure, do we really need that post? And I'll put my hands up, it's down to me just saying, no, I'm not happy to hold. That position might change as we get a bit more understanding around devolution. So it might feel a little bit brutal to hold those posts at this time, but it feels like the right thing to do. And we'll continuously review that as we go forward.
Please.
Thank you. In regards to the reduction in the communication spend, I just wondered what being a new member of the board as well, what is the level of communication support that you have for the board and about communicating the messages and the work of the business plan to members of the public?
My chair, so sitting over there is our communications manager, James. It's definitely worth a conversation afterwards. So James heads up a very small team of an engagement manager, so someone who you'll see at events, perhaps sets up MPs meetings, member meetings, will coordinate some of the one-to-ones, for example, that Councillor Glazer and I have had with members. And we also have a communications apprentice who has been with us for, must be 18 months, a couple of years, taken on as an apprentice so that we can build and grow a team in a cost-effective way. That broadly is the communications support. Like any roles, we review that to make sure we've got it right. So they will shape our social media presence, support, for example, the Transport Strategy Refresh and the Your Voices work. So there's a number of activities that they undertake on behalf of you as a board and Transport South East.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, so we are recommended to note the current financial position, 24-25, to the end of December 24. Okay, everyone happy? Thank you. Agenda item 11, responses to consultation. Rupert, are you going to deal with this?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So two responses for the board to consider here. One is in relation to the consultation on the industrial strategy. There are only 3 questions within the industrial strategy consultation that we thought were pertinent, relevant to Transport for the South East. They all hinged really around the barriers to investment. There are a number of examples that we gave in our response that highlight how infrastructure can prevent things like human investment, social exclusion, movement in relation to skills, and business-to-business movements. There's a number of opportunities coming through on the horizon, so the infrastructure and planning and infrastructure bill, and potential changes to the NPP, National Planning Policy Framework, and the responses broadly highlight how infrastructure can support and enhance that connectivity and accessibility within the region. So a relatively simplistic response, but it just pushes home the point about the importance of connectivity in the South East.
Okay.
And if I could just go on to the second one, so this is a response to Bracknell Forest's local transport plan. Broadly, very compatible with our transport strategy. I should say that we've, because the draft transport strategy is currently out for consultation, therefore not adopted by this board, it's appropriate that we look at the adopted transport strategy. And there's a degree of compatibility between those 2 documents, and actually, there is also an alignment between what we're currently consulting on. There are a couple of points that are just worth drawing out. One is we've recommended that Bracknell think a little further than their borders. Those of you who know that area, it's a really important hub. That stretch up to the M3 and M4 is significant, and the LTP needs to focus on the importance of that corridor, in effect, outside of the administrative boundaries. We would also have liked it to have made reference to Transport South East and the transport strategy. I think that's quite important, given they're a partner around the table. But broadly, the response is compatible.
Okay.
Those are the 2.
We're happy with those? We agree the response to both. Thank you. So we move on to transport strategy refresh. And Mark, you again, please. This is, could answer some questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is just a report for information, just to keep board members updated with where we are on the consultation on the transport strategy refresh. So the board agreed on the 9th of December to launch the consultation. We then commenced that on the 10th of December with a consultation webinar. In terms of there were 153 people attended that, which was very encouraging. In terms of where we are with the number of responses, in terms of an update on that, we've had 300 so far. 289 of those are from individuals, with 11 from organisations, and we would expect the numbers from the organisations, particularly obviously our constituent authorities, to increase as we move towards the end of the 12-week consultation period, with the consultation ending on the 7th of March. We're about to commence some further public engagement events. The idea here is to meet with members of the public to talk about the strategy. So we've currently organised a number of events typically in library foyers at 7 locations across the southeast. Obviously we can't go everywhere, but this is just a mechanism for getting buy-in from members of the public to the strategy. So those will be taking place in Wokingham, Portsmouth, Southampton, Brighton, Canterbury, Guildford and Ryde on the Isle of Wight. We've been approached by a number of organisations also to attend some of their regular meetings, just to present on the transport strategy, and the report sets out the organisations to which we'll be giving presentations, including Logistics UK coming up. We've also got a special meeting of the Transport Forum later this week to help them formulate a response to the strategy. Quite a lot of communications activity also going on. We've produced a video that sort of sets out and summarises what the strategy is all about, and that provides us with a mechanism for specific social media activity to push the consultation and encourage people to respond. We've also recently sent out press briefing packs to our communications teams within our partner organisations, including our constituent authorities, for them to also share with the local press. In terms of what happens next, we'll be bringing a report to the board in July, setting out the results of the consultation. A consultation report will be produced, and what we'll be obviously doing at that July meeting is, from the consultation responses that we've received, setting out any changes we think are necessary to the strategy to reflect those comments that we've had. So that's just an update on where we are with the transport strategy refresh consultation.
Thank you. Sounds like we've had a good start with a number of people responding. So, Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that summary. It's very helpful. Can I check the dates for the event in Brighton, and how does that relate to the consultation dates? Just check that first.
I don't have the Brighton date in front. I can let you know immediately following the meeting when that is. But they're going to take place during through February. So I don't know quite when the first one is, but they start sort of on the 10th of February and they finish by the end.
Sorry.
So I just want a point of clarification, which is not on the TFC's strategy, but for the integrated national transport strategy. We have an invited event taking place for DFT on the 27th of February, being held regionally in Brighton, and yet the consultation for that strategy closes on the 20th, so that's 7 days before. And I think I just want to understand the interface between that national strategy and our regional strategy, if I may. Thank you.
So in terms of, should we say, the general direction of the integrated national transport strategy and what we understand about it, I think we're confident this side of actually sort of seeing something come out, that the way that we've drafted the strategy in terms of the missions, that there is going to be good overlap between what we've produced and what the integrated national transport strategy is going to have to say. Not that we know in any detail, but I think we're clear from some of the early soundings that there's likely to be good overlap. If there wasn't, then obviously there's an opportunity at that meeting, at the July meeting, to bring to the board any refinements that we think are necessary to ensure that our strategy is better aligned with the national strategy, if that's felt to be appropriate. But I would also sort of make the comment that whatever the national strategy says, our primary role is to say what a transport strategy for the South East needs to look like to ensure that it reflects, you know, our particular priorities. So there may be some areas where we don't quite overlap, but like I say, at the July board meeting, we can produce a more detailed report back as to what that level of alignment is looking like.
And just for confirmation, the headlines at the launch of the national strategy were, well, I could see an awful lot of what's in our strategy currently. So I wouldn't expect them to be miles apart, but it might be just a few areas where we differ on interpretation or on the list of where they sit. So we'll see.
Okay, keep coming back and on very similar point, but just to clarification, because clearly we have a wonderful City of Brighton and Hove. We have a lot of engagement, a lot of active stakeholders that really want to be part of that process. And yes, there's looks like there's two roadshow events, DFT and TFSE, will be taking place in our city. And I think just that sense of they're fairly close together, but you know, I just want to try and think through how the stakeholder engagement works for our city as well as our region, because I don't want to, just thinking, mapping it out, making it all stats together. I know this perhaps isn't the question for you in terms of the national strategy, but I'm slightly concerned about the consultation date ending on the 20th and having our regional meeting on the 27th. Those two, I would have thought would be a very round almost. You have the consultation finishing after the workshop, but anyway, that's more for the DFT, I do accept.
Yeah.
Just, I suppose that we knew that the DFT were keen, or the Integrated National Transport Strategy team were keen to do some regional roadshows. What we weren't sure about is the timing of that, partly because of the Secretary of State change. And I think I'm probably right in saying that the new Secretary of State, I suspect, wanted to assure herself that this is the direction that they wanted to go. That, I understand, is happening, and the department, or the Integrated National Transport Strategy team, have come out to us and said, look, we want to work with subnational transport bodies to organise these roadshows. So we're sort of involved in both the Integrated National Transport Strategy work, and then separately, there's the work that Mark's doing on the Transport Strategy refresh. I think your point about where's the alignment, so the 7 subnational transport bodies had very early conversations with Danny Williams, who's leading on this work, to ensure that there is a sort of that important dialogue between what's happening on the national strategy and what's emerging regionally. As Mark says, there are going to be regional differences. You know, so what might be right for the far west of Cornwall is going to be very different to, you know, Felixstowe, for example. But the broad principles, I think, you know, what I gleaned from that was certainly a sense of alignment between what's coming out of the regional strategies and what I suspect we'll start to see emerge in the Integrated National Transport Strategy work. And as Mark has said, there's a number of bites of the cherry, you know, just in case that alignment needs to be revisited.
Yeah, and I agree with all that, Rupert. And I would expect to be quite different things, actually. I think the Integrated National Transport Strategy will look less like what you might traditionally sent to be a strategy. It's more likely to be much higher level, much sort of around principles and areas to develop. It won't be getting into sort of schemes and priorities for regions and that sort of thing. So I would see them much more as things that complement each other. I think that, you know, of course, you want alignment with the sort of the overall ambition, but I don't think the risk of them covering the same ground but in a different way is that high.
Are we okay on that? Any further comments? No? So recommended to comment, which we've just done on the progress of the draft transport strategy. So I think we've done that one. Thank you. We go on to 13, which is the Business Advisory Group. I don't know whether Vince or Daniel would do. Daniel, you're going to take the lead, please.
Thank you, Keith. Daniel Roth again. We've had 2 meetings of the Business Advisory Group since this partnership board last gathered, both moving things forwards very convincingly. One of the things that we mentioned last time was that we're now, every meeting, trying to listen to what the business members are struggling with, or what's high on their agenda. So we talked about that, and Vince will expand a bit on some of the three top items. We also are working up a straw man for a wider gathering. So sometime this year, we're hoping to get together a very broad business community, or representation of the business community, to talk about how business wants to influence or can influence and benefit from what TFAC is doing. So, and actually, on behalf of Vince, I'd like to thank Jess and Keir for the excellent work they're doing to support for that business advisory group. So the three things that we are prioritising at the moment. Over to Vince.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. I think the group has had a pretty good start. We started off figuring out terms of reference, as said, as we always seem to, but we moved pretty quickly into half the meeting being about the issues of the members. And as the members are predominantly at the early stage, we started with Chambers of Commerce. So we had a broad business membership with some key players. For example, we usually have someone from the cross-channel ports talking about some of their issues. So we're trying to build that out. So that's been quite good. We put in the paper a few of the things that are arising. One is Heathrow Western Rail Access from Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. They put it as an economic refresh. I think the work that Keir and others have done in the intervening times, and some of the conversations we're having, is that the economic case, the last time it was looked at, was quite strong. And we've talked with Network Rail on that subsequent to the request from Thames Valley. The issue is there's no money. And so the point of what we're trying to understand with the point of this study is whether it really is for an economic refresh, whether it's to push the agenda forward. But certainly it's a scheme that's part of our strategic plan. It's a scheme that we would support in general terms, although we're still figuring out whether that's something that would be appropriate to fund, and we'll come back to a future meeting on that. The second point, which a number of the businesses raised, was around transport-related social exclusion. I think it fits in with our future priorities from our transport strategy refresh, but there was lots of talk about areas of the communities that just have very, very poor public transport and are dependent on private road vehicles, etc. And that may be an area for future work, just to look at that social exclusion, how it's impacting. We've seen elsewhere, and there was discussion about the linkages between that, health outcomes, etc. And so that was another area. This time, we usually have a discussion somewhere about entry-exit system for the EU, and Portadover discussed that amongst other things, and waiting. I think particularly because Portadover have got some grant funding that's in abeyance, and are keen to know how that's going alongside the progress of the entry-exit system, if and when it does happen, because there are severe space constraints at Dover that need to be addressed to get the free flow through the ports. A couple of other points not in the paper which the group were keen on. One was energy strategy, and how is all this going to link alongside energy strategy? We know that there was a national, the regional energy strategy consultation, I think, concluded in the autumn. Was due to be announced the outcomes in the winter, but has not done so yet. I think it's still not confirmed decision. And I think the group felt that there's a need to make sure that whatever we're doing in TFSE is very closely matched with energy strategy, emphasised by Portadover, who are looking at what's the possibility for electric ferries into the future, and what on earth that would do to transport grids, to network power grids. And so keeping those two aligned was seen as a really important thing by businesses. And finally, we talked about what the purpose of TFSE is, as you'd imagine. But there was a view from the businesses that what TFSE does is integrate across the boundaries in terms of strategy. I think is what you were talking about before. And this can be at very local level. If you take bus fares, they happen within a very, very small local authority area, where we often think about road schemes or rail schemes are across wider. And so the businesses look into TFSE to try and encourage integration across the boundaries, whatever they may be now and in the future. And they can happen at district level, they could happen at a rail organisation level, a bus organisation level, but for TFSE to be the champion of the strategy across the boundaries.
That absolutely makes sense. Any questions or comments?
I'll be very quick. I mean, I agree completely. I come up from sort of Medway today on my phone is the only ticket I had in my hand. And if we could do that across the whole of the CFSC region, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? So that's a sort of dream, but it'd be certainly great to be able to achieve that sort of ticketing dream, if you like. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments? Well, keep it going is the answer, isn't it? I mean, the enthusiasm was there from what I can see, and so, you know, it really does, from our perspective, just getting the voice of business is really important. So thanks for what you're doing. Keep going.
You're welcome.
We're recommended to note the recent work of the Business Advisory Group. Thank you very much. I'm sure we've noted that. We come to 14, which is the Advisory Panel and Transport Forum update. Jeff, I think you're going to take that.
Yeah, I'm going to try. Yes, I wanted just to take the opportunity today to summarise some of the extracurricular things that are happening. And so just look backwards before we look forward. The second in-person Transport Forum took place on the 18th of November in Southampton. And the good thing there was the event saw good attendance from regional partners, including Network Rail, National Highways, local transport authorities, and representatives from transport operators and user groups. So to try and make sure that we are getting a good range of opinions. And then after that, we spoke to them about the emerging draft transport strategy. Can't even say that this one. And then the second part of that session reviewed the recent consultation on next steps for TFSE, all the things you would expect that group to do. But that wasn't so long ago, the Transport Forum, but there is another Transport Forum which will take place on Thursday, no rest of the wicked, and will focus mainly on the draft transport strategy refresh. That is the plan. And the other thing I wanted to underline was I'd also wanted to highlight that the advisory panel recently met, noting the focus of the devolution white paper and recognising the role that TFSE have in ensuring collaborative working. Now, I know that's what we say every time we come to a meeting like this, collaborative working, but the point was made that it's especially important to recognise that different areas within TFSE are concerned about the progress of devolution and don't want any of their own people to be left behind, to make sure that we're covering all of the TFSE area. Other than that, we will carry on doing that and pumping them for ideas and thoughts.
Thanks.
Okay.
And on that last point, I mean, I think it's really important that we've got to recognise that there will be not just one route or one timescale. We've got to actually keep everybody engaged all the way through. So we can do that quite easily, I would hope. Any other comments or questions on? No? Well, thank you very much, Jeff. We are asked to note the recent work of the Transport Forum and Advisory Panel, so hopefully we can do that. Thank you. Delivery of the Strategic Investment Plan. Sarah, I think you're going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to go through this paper in any great detail. I presume that it has been read, but just a couple of things worth highlighting. The paper, as usual, sets out a number of different work streams that are underway to support delivery of the schemes that are set out within the Strategic Investment Plan. Particularly around scheme development, a number of schemes that you approved as the schemes to receive funding for this year at a previous board meeting are now just about starting to get underway, which is really good news. We've got 7 schemes underway, and then also the additional one for which additional funding is found, so that's an additional scheme as well. The paper also highlights our role in managing the major road network and large local major programme for the region, and particularly the support we're offering to scheme promoters from our partner authorities. That is around sort of centre of excellence seminars, where we've been having a real deep dive into some of the more technical issues around getting scheme funding approved and the business cases that are needed to support that. Also the development of the analytical framework which supports those business cases, and the opportunity for partners within local authorities to just literally have some ad hoc advice from us as to how best to go about it. The paper also highlights our role in the development of the roads investment strategy, and we are continuing our dialogue with both the Department for Transport and National Highways as that process progresses. In terms of some key highlights of the analytical framework, we're continuing development of the analytical framework as was set out in the approved plan, with real focus on addressing gaps from our partners and also how we can add most value to our partners as well. We're very conscious that in developing the analytical framework, it not only needs to work for us, but also for our partner authorities as well. A couple of things that are underway at the moment. We've just finished the data gathering for a regional travel survey, in the process of validating that data before we can start using it, and we are supplementing that by acquiring mobile network data for the region as well. Both of those, again, looking at how we can add value to partners, so how we can then share that data with all of you so that you can use it to best ability as well. The development of our model is progressing very well as well. And we're looking at how we can expand sort of our capability capacity. So looking, we've got advertised a potential project that a master's student could apply for and help us out with some research. That's around valuing transport resilience, or more how we value the economic impact were, say, a section of the network to not exist. And also looking at various other opportunities for collaboration with tools and data analysis as well. Lastly, the State of the Region report, amazingly, it is nearly 2 years since that was first published, so the data analysis is underway now to update that with a view to publishing it later on in the summer. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Still an awful lot going on, which is...
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on one point, Table 1 is reference to the Strood Interchange project, a feasibility study. Obviously, that's completed. Partly on the back of that work, and as a result, we're now expanding that project in Strood. It's a hugely important station for us, and we're looking at putting a bus depot right next to it, on the land next to it, to create an integrated transport hub for the centre of Medway. So it's a very exciting time. The plans are starting to come together, and we'll go into our local plan. So grateful for the funding to help with that. Cheers.
Well done, Simon. Okay. No other comments, so thank you, Sarah. We are recommended to note the progress of the range of work streams that support the delivery of the strategic investment plan. Hopefully we can do that. Thank you. 16, which is the technical programme update. Mark. Thank you. Musical chairs.
So this report just sets out updates on some of the work that we've got going on as part of our technical programme. I don't intend to run through all of the sections, but I believe Councillor Curry asked some questions about a couple of pieces of freight work which are given some coverage in the report at paragraph 6.3 in terms of the work that we're currently undertaking, just having a look at the potential impact of transferring freight from road to short sea shipping, and also the warehousing provision study that we've got going on. As the report sets out, we're hoping to have those two pieces of work completed shortly. So the short sea shipping work, we're bringing that to the March board meeting to bring that to the attention of members, and the warehousing work, we'll be reporting back on that in July 2025. So in terms of the other piece of work, just to highlight, you mentioned in an earlier exchange about the intermodal rail freight study, which is currently ongoing. Again, that's due to be completed by March 2025, so we'll be bringing a report on the findings of that to the board for them to have a look at. happy to take any questions on any of the other aspects of the technical programme.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please, Councillor Roberts.
With the report about the intermodal rail freight study, is that going out to individual businesses, or how is that being? Are you just talking about public sector or businesses being invited as well? Because I've got a couple of B Corps that are in my area, and they are not able to reach their sort of carbon targets because of the fact that they still need to use the roads for freight and deliveries, and it's something that they've been quite keen to talk and contribute to. So I just wonder if that's the sort of thing that you'll be interested to hear from.
It's a sort of mainly a desktop study. There is some consultation in the steering group that's helping with its formulation. But if there are some specific businesses that you think it would be good to get, used as sort of case studies, if you like, then if I can get in touch with you following the meeting, we can look to see if we can involve them in the work in some way.
Okay. No other questions or comments? Goodness. Flying through it today. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. 17 is communications stakeholders engagement. James. Oh.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all in person. My name is James Boyes. I'm the comms manager for TFSE. I won't talk too much, partly because Mark's stolen all my good lines anyway with his update, but just say we're really pleased we hit 300 over the weekend. With regards to the number of responses, but obviously that's not the end of the story. We've got some events going. Trevor, I think the 5th of February is the Brighton event that we're doing, which is at the Jubilee Library. I don't know if it's afternoon or morning yet, but that's when that is. That's another opportunity to meet the public. We've done some sort of like little business cards with a QR code that we're going to give out to people so they can just do it on their phones and respond that way online. I've contacted all the comms teams from our constituent authorities as well. I've had responses this morning from Medway and Portsmouth who told me that they've also shared that consultation information on their online as well. So I know that a lot of it's a busy time for everybody, but any response that we can get, any support we can get from our teams as well, would be really grateful from within the local authority network. And my intention is to contact everybody at some point very soon, just to sort of maybe get some dialogue going with the teams as well, that we can hopefully be of mutual benefit to all of us. As we've talked about the MPs, the MPs programme is carrying on with regards to highlighting the work that we're doing in TFSE and also about the consultation. And Councillor Glazier and Rupert met Dr. Al Pinkerton from Surrey Heath a few weeks ago. Had a good chat with him about transport issues in his constituency. And last week we went to the Future Transport Forum in Southampton for a couple of days, which was hosted by Solent Transport. We met reps from local authorities, universities, consultants, and other interest groups. Primarily it was about pushing the consultation, which was very good. We had some good interesting discussions. And like Mark said, some of them have been individuals, but some of them are a little bit more measured responses that need a bit more time from organisations. So we're hoping for a mad rush in the last few weeks of this. And the DFT meeting has been 27th of February. We talked about that briefly as well. There's two parts of that. The afternoon will be a series of workshops on the strategy, an opportunity for DFT to gain an understanding, like a regional perspective of the important issues in the South East. But in the morning, there's a strategic leaders workshop, which the DFT are planning to send out invites for during this week, hopefully very soon. They're going towards council leaders and board members, so I think there's a big discussion within each authority as to who does go to those. So it's a sort of a double header for the DFT for that meeting in February. So that's it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Any other comment? Matt?
Thanks very much, Keith. Matt Borton, leader of Tunbridge and Moorland Council. I suppose I should raise this, given I'm here sort of on one or two on behalf of district and borough councils, just about making sure that the details of consultation have been circulated to all district and borough council comms teams too, because we can help promote that, particularly amongst sort of like key organisations within the borough who wouldn't necessarily engage on that sort of county-wide basis. The reason I mention that is because I know there are a couple of schemes which are sort of too local for Kent, but sort of fit sort of somewhere in the middle, that people are sort of looking to to have the opportunity to feed into to this sort of strategic work. So as you were saying that, James, I just thought there's an opportunity there to really sort of engage and get those numbers up of responses too. And that will also help with the work that TFSE does in terms of getting that to as wide a possible audience as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do. We'll do that this week.
Any other comments? I think the MP consultation is going very well. It's received well by those that we make contact with, but if any of you have any way of getting any of your local MPs more interested, just don't hesitate to contact James, because it's probably not the most inviting thing to come along to, but once they get there and recognise that they can influence what's going to happen, they get the hang of it. But as always, MPs think about, they're very much more parochial animals than we are, even though they're running the world. Oh no, just the country at the moment, isn't it? So, but any help we can have would be very welcome, wouldn't it? So thanks again, James. Sorry, Councillor Cox.
Sorry, one just last point. And just say that our MP for Worthing was my predecessor on this board, so I'm hopeful that Becky Cooper will still have a big interest and will now still get in touch and feedback. Just in terms of the business plan, and I'm just going back to the A27 again, will the individual projects that are on that list be publicised as sort of schemes of work or going out there so we can tell the public about what that next step will be happening in terms of the A27 work? Or is that not sort of the process?
I'm not sure we've sort of got to that level of detail just yet, but I think where it's relevant for local information, local communication, we can certainly look to do that.
Just worth adding, so there's a number of specific interventions that are indicated in the strategic investment plan. So A27 East of Worthing, Worthing Lancing, Arundel, the M27 one, I think Chichester's in there from memory. So there's the strategic investment plan sets out specific interventions. The work that we were talking about, earlier on about funding and finance is just sort of broad piece of work along that corridor. What I'm hoping with that work is it provides a model to be applied on other corridors that are quite challenging. So classic example might be the A3 at Guildford, which is a really challenging pinch point. Are there models that we can draw in different sorts of mixed funding sources? So that's the kind of opportunity. We're not in a place to nail it down other than what's in the SIP at the moment.
Okay. We are asked to note the engagement and communications activity been undertaken since the last board meeting, so hopefully we're happy to do that. Which brings us to any other business. So over to you. Is there anything anyone else wants to raise? My goodness. We got through that then, didn't we? Thank you very much indeed. Currently, the next meeting is scheduled for the 17th of March, face-to-face here in London again. We will confirm that at a later date.
Yes, we'll confirm that after this meeting.
Thank you. With that, thank you all very much for your attendance and safe journey home, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. You normally have Joy next to me, so I was